Okay, so one of the things that we should know is that our brains are very much like old OG lizard brains, caveman brains. Most of us don't move towards our big goals because our brains crave immediate task execution. So for example, like when I have something to do, like putting together a slide deck for said productivity webinar, my house has never been so clean because my brain's like, let's go ahead and get this one task done. So one of our biggest things that we need to work on is governing our monkey mind. It's the way to hit big goals. So the first thing that we have to do is, big surprise, identify your big goals. That's for the product, for yourself, for your business. And I feel like it's important also to make sure that like I've got for yourself in there because we, really enjoy working in our business, and a lot of times that's intertwined with who we are, but make sure that as a call out, you've got some big goals for yourself as well. We won't be talking about that much today, but I always feel like it's important to put it out there. You will not reach your goals if you don't know what they are. It feels like common sense, but there are a lot of people out there floundering around just, kind of like checking things off their task list without necessarily like understanding whether they actually tie to what they're doing in their business. So the thing that I do every day is this daily data dump. If anybody out there is a Harry Potter fan, I think of it as like a pensieve, like pull all of that stuff out of your brain. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you're probably not as big of a nerd as I am. But essentially my idea every single morning and during the day is to get everything out of my brain. At the end of the day, like your brain can really only manage 4 to 7 items at a time if you're lucky. Most of us are on the 4 range. So you can test that out by going to the grocery store and trying to remember 4 to 5 things simultaneously instead of having a list, and you'll come home with like nothing that you needed and like a can of Diet Coke and an issue of People. So it's this really funny thing where we really can't hold things simultaneously. So the best thing to do is exit them from your brain. So essentially what you find is that if you're trying to keep all those things at the same time, you'll feel a lot of stress. And your brain doesn't have room to innovate. So the first thing to do every day, and as you can, is write everything down. I have different lists. I have a to-do list for work. I have that to-do list for personal. And then of course I have like random innovations ideas. I'm guessing everyone on this call probably has a lot of those. And so making sure you've got your $1 million idea list available at all times is really critical. I use the most important task method. And you may have heard of this before, but essentially I am taking a look at that big daily data dump, and then I'm evaluating it against a couple things. Like number one, does it tie to my big goal? If it doesn't, shouldn't be on there. How much time does it take? Like understanding like how much of your day you're gonna need to dedicate to it. And then if you alone have the skill set to do it. And that's just kind of a nod to making sure that you're delegating anything that doesn't need your big brain. At the end of the day, what you wanna look at for the most important task method is the importance or value add plus the urgency, and that helps set your prioritization. It's also important to note that importance is not urgency. Urgency is a place when you're in reactive mode. So a lot of times you'll feel like something is really urgent because someone is requesting it from you. But if you take a step back and understand like, all right, is this actually important to my big goal, or is this important to somebody else? That can help you delineate between urgency and importance. So once you understand whether something's important and or urgent, then this is your task order. So of course, anything that's important and urgent goes first. Important but not urgent is second, which may seem counterintuitive, but important and not urgent means that like it never gets to urgency, which is helpful to get ahead of the game. Not important and urgent are often things that are interruptions. So they feel very urgent because like someone again is like kind of knocking on your door, but if they're not important, don't address them until, like essentially like the tertiary priority level. And then not important and not urgent are time wasters. That's what I'm talking about earlier when you find yourself like cleaning the house or running an errand that you don't have to do, or playing around on Facebook to figure out like some zany little thing. Those things like the very bottom of your list, and only when you have the luxury of an amazing amount of time. But typically like I just exit anything that's in the 4th category and go back to the 1st and the 2nd. So once you're looking at your most important task list, it can be kind of difficult to, especially if you're a solopreneur, like really get a sense of what your priorities are. So here's some additional ways to do that. Number one, ask for help. A lot of times having a second person talk through what your priority list looks like can lend perspective. So they can challenge you where you need to be challenged. They can say like, okay, so you think this is important, but let's think about the nuances of this and can we make it more specific? So asking for help from either a colleague, a boss, or somebody that you consider as a mentor or someone at your same level. Make sure that when you're approaching your priority list, you're out of your reactive and people pleaser space. So we all, not, I mean, I say we all, but most people have a tendency to feel like, oh, you know, I've got this request from a client, or I have this request from a boss, or there's somebody in my world that needs something from me. This is where we're getting into urgency. Think about it and really understand, like, all right, am I people pleasing? Is this urgency being set by somebody else? Or can I remove myself from that scenario and understand like how it ties directly to my big goal and not theirs? And then I feel like for me, a real clarifying question that I can approach my to-do list with is, if I had to stop work today after one task, what would it be? And so once you identify that one task, you do that one task, and then you go back to your to-do list and you say, all right, now if I had to stop work today, what would my task be? So everybody's got a different way of approaching their priority list. I feel like you've got the kind of like objective algorithm of importance plus urgency that can help you pull things out of that daily data dump. And then if you need additional clarification, you have questions like this and people that can help you. All right. So one of the things that has been really effective for me is Gretchen Rubin's motivational tendencies quiz. And it's one of those things where you're like, oh God, am I just taking one of these BuzzFeed quizzes? How annoying. That's not this. This essentially is the idea that there are 4 motivational types. This would have really helped me in college to know exactly what my motivational type was. I feel like I would have actually, you know, done better or gotten things done, like papers in on time instead of the day after. But there are essentially 4 motivational types. There's an upholder that just wants to know what should be done. That person can just add their stuff to the calendar and to their to-do list. There's a questioner who wants a justification, so you always need to know the why. And so in order to actually accomplish the task, you're gonna need to know your why so that you can be fired up to do it. There's the obliger, like me, who needs accountability, so I'm always gonna need somebody to give me a deadline, and that's when you hire or ask for a partner. And then rebels want the freedom to do things their own way. And so you need to ask for, or ask a boss or whomever is like setting your priorities, or give yourself creative license within that task. So what I found is, by understanding my motivational tendency, I can approach my to-do list with a measure of efficacy that I couldn't previously. So if you're an upholder, you're like, to-do list, nailed it, no problem. But if you're any one of these other types, then you have to frame your to-do list within the way that you would actually be motivated to get things done. And so once you have established your motivational type, looked at your to-do list, figured out your most important tasks every day, and then also understood exactly, oh, I got like a poll. Oh, I see. Chris, did you set up a poll?
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
Dang, you're so productive right now.
You want to get some
right, I know. And then you have to understand like what tool you want to use. So for me, I've used Todoist. I love Todoist. It integrates with a lot of things. Like if you're using Zapier, if you're using IFTTT, Google Tasks and Google Keep is kind of what I've switched to, just because it's integrated so seamlessly with Gmail, and my entire environment is a Google ecosystem. Things is one that you can pay for. It's really effective, but it's also one of those things where you're like, do I need to spend more money if I already have a to-do list? But Things is really delightful if you feel like you've got a little extra cash. Evernote, of course, and then on paper if you're a paper person. The key is that you always have the capacity to add something to that to-do list. So if you're a paper person, you know, drag around that notebook all the time. But for the rest of us, like with a digital tool, just make sure that it's always at the ready and that you're consistently like exiting things from your brain to create space and also to help create priority in the future.